sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Hello and welcome to Secular Sexuality, the ACA show that just wants to know, how does that make you feel? I'm Christy Powell, and my guest tonight wrote the book on sex and God. Welcome, Dr. Darrel Ray.
Thanks for having me again, Christy. Always glad to be on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And joining us tonight for the first time is artist and psychotherapist Andy Lane.
Ooh, you threw artist in there. I like that.
Yeah, right?
I did not write the book on sex or God, but maybe I'll write the sequel.
Hey, always more to be said. Glad to have you here. Glad to have your take, and glad to have everybody watching tonight. Because tonight it's my pleasure to reintroduce, of course, the founder of the Secular Therapy Project, which is a free resource for finding a confirmed evidence-based practitioner, and tonight to speak with two healing professionals that I really admire. So if you've ever felt intimidated or unsure about how to find a counselor, call the show. We're going to be at 512-991-9242 or tiny.cc/callsex because the show is coming right now. All right. Andy, I am going to, start with you because the idea for this episode was at least partly inspired by something I saw you post online a few months ago, offering to help kind of matchmake for some of your friends who may be having trouble finding a therapist. And I guess I'm curious why you think this is such a challenge for so many people.
Well, I mean, if you look at any of like the websites that have a bunch of therapists on there, it can be kind of daunting. And I think in Austin, you know, if you throw a rock, you're going to hit a therapist, you know?
Yeah, fair to say.
And so I feel like it's kind of hard. I mean, freedom is an existential crisis. Like, what do I do? What do I do? Well, with all these choices, right? So, yeah, I think every year, or maybe every other year, I kind of get this wild hair of saying, you know, whoever's following me on my personal social media accounts, which I guess we are friends. We are friends personally. You know, if they're looking for a therapist, I can't be their therapist because we're already friends.
Sure.
But I have a network, and so I can kind of lead them in the direction, especially if I know them.
Yeah, honestly, that type of personal touch, like being able to say, like, I know this therapist's personality and I know this human being's personality, I bet they would go pretty well together, is an invaluable resource. And it's something that most people don't have the opportunity to rely on. It's just another reason why like dating or making friends with a therapist is a great idea. Highly recommend it to everybody involved. But there is a lot to this. I mean, Darrel, I think most of our audience is familiar with the Secular Therapy Project. I mean, God knows we talk about it often enough on this show, but I'm curious what drove you to launch that project.
Well, I'll just pick up where Andy is. I've been doing that for years, Andy. I know therapists and I have friends. I can't be their therapist. Don't want to be their therapist. So I don't know how many hundreds of times I've made connections between therapists. And in fact, sometimes I joke I should get a finder's fee or something. but it is a real advantage, Christy. I think it's a real advantage to have somebody that kind of understands both ends of that equation, because there's some people I would, knowing them, I know that really good therapist over there would not probably work with them, or it wouldn't work. It wouldn't be as productive. So, I mean, of course, it's my judgment call. I could be 100% wrong. I have been 100% wrong, but but I'd say more or less, I'm probably on the asset. I'm probably on the positive side, as I'm sure you are too, Andy.
Yeah, and isn't it interesting how, like, you know, whenever you do those posts or throw yourself out there, people respond. Like every time I've done that, I've had, you know, a plethora of people just like jump in and like, hey, I'm so glad. I just needed that extra kick. Thank you so much for reaching out. Yeah. But
in answer to your question, Christy, back in 2011, after I'd published the God virus, I get all these people wanting me to help them find a therapist. Literally what Andy was just saying. And I couldn't possibly help everybody that's coming to me. Hundreds, maybe ultimately thousands over the years. So I just decided it's time to put together a registry of people that are using evidence-based methodologies that have got some clear validation, and then let those people find the therapist themselves. So that's what started it. And we just passed 505 therapists last week, and over 23,000 clients that have registered with our database. So it's
awesome.
Congratulations on that.
Yeah, we're really, really happy about
That's
it.
great.
We've got a whole team that works on this every day. And there's something, we can talk about this later, but the whole training issue around really poorly trained therapists, especially coming out of religious schools, is one of the hazards.
I don't often admit this, but I did graduate from
a
religious school. And I can
Same.
say, I think I'm a great therapist. I mean, I hope so. I try.
We're biased.
But I can definitely say I graduated with some people that I would never recommend to my mother, my friend, my whoever.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Right. Well, we actually, in our read, it's kind of funny. One of the Dr. Tanya Johnson is the co-director of the Secular Therapy Project. She's a graduate of Liberty University.
Oh, wow.
Well, obviously she's kind of gone through some changes since that time. But I'm shocked. We've had graduates from Bob Jones. We've had from Liberty, from Regents. But, they got out and they realized what they got back there was useless. They went back to school or they got, some independent training. I mean, they're fully qualified to be part of the Secular Therapy Project, and they've lost all the religious supernatural bullshit. So that's, but I'm not, and you're, we love you, Christy. I don't care what school you went to.
Yeah. So I've done my homework, right? I think that's my big takeaway. I'm not going to say that I went to a diploma mill, but it was definitely not a lot of academic rigor.
Yeah.
I almost hesitate to say this on air, but the absolute truth is I graduated with a master's degree from a institution that had the one professor I had 3 separate times, and all of our tests were online. And when going through one of the tests, I recognized that there was a question I wasn't entirely sure about the answer for, and I started to look it up, and I found out that entire test, and in fact all of that professor's tests, were taken from a free website. Which is just to say, it is very possible to become a professional therapist without having actually done the work of learning how to do therapy. And I hate saying that. I am so passionate about what I do. I love my field so much, and it makes me just furious. The unqualified, inexperienced, and frankly, wrong, all of these supernatural beliefs and all of these flawed thinkings that goes into a field that shares my licensure that I worked so hard to get.
Yeah. There's a Christian counselor on every corner in Texas, especially in Dallas.
That's true.
Yeah, there
they
is.
go.
And again, the lay public has no way to know, especially if they've been brainwashed into thinking that you've got to be a Christian counselor or you're going to be led away from Jesus or something. But
yeah,
it's just a critical thing for the lay public.
My biggest thing with that, I think, is that there's an agenda.
Yeah.
And when a therapist is trying to drive you in a particular direction.
And to me, that's conditional. You need to be in an unconditional situation in which you can accept the person and let them unfold into who they are, and trust the process of self-preservation and all of that. And whenever you have an agenda for anyone, it robs you of seeing them in the session.
Well, and so many issues that people go to therapy for are just the anathema to the religious counselor. I mean, somebody who goes in and they're dealing with sexual issues, or they're engaged in a premarital relationship, or they're gay, or they're thinking they might identify as trans. There's any number of things. Most of those people have no training, and what training they got was pray the gay away kind of shit. It's really, it's terrible. And what we've seen for years, I mean, literally for years at the Secular Therapy Project, people coming to us and saying, I went to a therapist not knowing they were Christian, no evidence. I mean, they didn't say anything, but when we got deep into it, about 3-4 sessions in, they wanted to pray with me.
Yeah,
oh man,
that's
incredibly alienating and hurtful in so many different ways.
Right.
You know, it's worth saying again, I also made it through my entire academic career without ever taking a single class on human sexuality.
Wow.
And that's a knowledge gap that I've obviously worked very hard to fill in and to overcome. But there is no guarantee that the random therapist that you happen to find on Psychology Today or one of these websites has ever had any meaningful training on issues of gender or sexuality or any of these things. So just broad strokes, what are some of the general guidelines on what people should be looking for to make sure that the professional that they're speaking with has a decent education, is using evidence-based practices, or has, you know, at least a rudimentary understanding of what the hell they're doing?
Well, it's hard, right? I mean, I've met therapists that had all the trainings.
Sure.
And
yeah, fair to say.
They would be, you know, not a good fit for a lot of clients. And then I've met people who were not yet therapists, who were pre-grad, just graduated their master's program. And I was like, man, this person is going to kill it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I'll acknowledge, in putting together my notes for this episode, I created a blog sheet like I usually do, where I mentioned a bunch of therapists local to any folks here in Austin that are looking for great professionals. And I put a number of people on there who are in their internship phase, or I guess now in Texas, we're calling them associates and these different things. And I do think that you can be incredibly talented at that level. If it's the right person, if it's the right fit. I guess we'll get into the different types of licensure and some of those questions a little bit later on, just to say that everybody's resources are different. And so I recognize some people are looking for $40 an hour therapy rather than $150 an hour therapy. And that's valid. And there are plenty of $40 an hour therapists that I have a lot more respect and a lot more trust for than some of the $150, $200 therapists that I happen to know.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. I think it's also like a healthy balance of, you know, you got to have evidence-based stuff. You have to have it, but you can't just rely upon that and not be a human being in the room.
Sure.
You know what I mean? I don't know. This is kind of going on a tangent, but if you guys will come with me, we can go on a journey. I always tell my clients the two most important words are authentic and appropriate. So always be authentic in every situation you're in, but you got to read the room.
Sure. You
got to read the room, and you got to have kind of your skeleton and your map. And I think that that's where it's like, well, how qualified are you? Are you licensed? That's where it's appropriate. And you also have to show up as yourself. I don't know. What are your thoughts? What do you think?
No, I think that connection is by far the most important thing. And I do want to get into some of the nitty-gritty specifics of, like, how do you read a Psychology Today, for instance, like a profile like that, and find like somebody who fits with you. But as important as it is to be considering like the particular treatment modalities, the particular education or interest or whatever of your therapist, it is worth noting that the most important part of therapy is the relationship and that sense of connection. And so if this is somebody who doesn't pass the beer test, maybe somebody that you couldn't imagine wanting to ever share your secrets with because they just make you feel uncomfortable or in some way don't really quite resonate with you, that's a very important data point, perhaps the most important data point,
100%.
something I encourage people to listen to.
And that's where the part about knowing the network and saying that I have hung out with you, Christy, before, I can kind of vouch for that beer test or whatever, whenever someone's like, I'm looking for a therapist, because they could see you on Psychology Today or whatever website, and they wouldn't necessarily know that you can vibe with them. That's the hardest part. That's the biggest risk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One thing, I got my own list of things I would be looking for if I was a client. But one thing that I find off-putting as in our role as trying to create a database for therapists is when we see a therapist with a master's degree and they've been out 3 or 4 years and they're listing 25 different specialties. That's a big red flag for me. I don't care who you are. I've got a doctorate. I couldn't have achieved all those things with any competence within 20 years probably. And then I'd still be a bit suspicious. But you look at some of the things listed on Psychology Today, and they've got a whole laundry list of stuff that they claim expertise in.
That is a really good red flag to be aware of.
Yeah. I totally agree with the relationship thing. I mean, it's the foundation for the whole process of therapeutic growth. I do know, unfortunately, I think you've got to have that balance. I think, Andy, that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Some of the earliest training you're going to get as a therapist is how do you develop rapport with a client? I mean, if you don't have rapport building skills so that they feel comfortable with you, you're not probably going to go anywhere. Mm-hmm. But you need to get those rapport building skills. You need to be out of the way in a reasonable period of time, a session or two, so you can get on to the other stuff. Because if all you're doing is feeling good, all you're doing is Rogerian active listening, you ain't helping that person, especially if there's trauma involved. In fact, you could actually be hurting that person. Mm-hmm. So my contention is I admit all the rapport building stuff is important, but you also got to get into the nitty gritty fairly quickly because a lot of people aren't going to stick around for more than 6 sessions, 10 sessions at most. And if you can't help them, I always tell my clients, if I can't help you in 6 sessions, I mean, help you in a way that you can look back and say, I have absolutely got my money's worth, then I have failed. And I'm pretty frank with people about that. And I'm not pushing short-term stuff. I'm just saying within 5 or 6 sessions, if I haven't developed rapport, understand the basic issues they're dealing with and given them some tools that they can go out and practice with. And I always give homework. I mean, homework is like 100% of the time you are going to get a piece of homework. You may not want to do it. That's a whole nother question.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Valid.
But I'm not going to be lazy. I'm going to always look for how can I give you tools. That's what I want to do.
Is that nitty gritty for you? Is that kind of like what you mean by nitty gritty is doing the tools and the homework and treatment plan and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I'm not big into treatment plan, but okay.
Me either.
I have nothing against it. I'm just saying, after 30 years of dealing with clients face to face, I've got a pretty good sense of where we need to go after 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah. And I don't want to delay their pain. I don't want to increase their pain, and I don't want to take their money and not see make them feel like that they're getting something that's valuable and we're sticking around for.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I've had clients for 2 or 3 years. That's easy. And the reason it's easy is because they feel like, man, when I go to see Darrel every 2 weeks, I leave with a whole fresh perspective on something and I try something new. Mm-hmm. If I wasn't giving them that in 6 weeks, they wouldn't be there 2 years later. And I'm not trying to create a 2-year-long dependency either. I mean, usually it backs off from once a week to once every 2 weeks to once a month.
Yeah.
And then maybe a checkup every 6 months or whenever they want the checkup. That's really my goal.
And that's that fine line, right? Of being like, well, you want to give them tools and homework, but you don't want them to rely upon your tools and your homework. You want them to be able to kind of have initiative and autonomy to do their own stuff.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, we've already got some calls stacking up, but before we transition over, there were a handful of things I wanted to make sure to kind of hit on. First is I mentioned the possibility of working with a intern or an associate. Some of the language that we're using is going to vary a little bit state by state, so I don't want to get too hung up on it, but I do want to recognize the difference between a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a licensed professional counselor, a licensed marriage and family therapist, a counseling social worker versus a master's of social worker. Like, who should we be working with? If somebody is wanting to find, quote, a therapist, and they're imagining themselves, sitting down and talking about their feelings for 50 minutes a week, what are they looking for? What should they be looking for?
I think you should take this, Darrel, because I want to hear how you did your filtering system for your network and whatnot. I want to hear what you think about that, as far as like, what license or type of counselor a client should be working for or working with.
Are you talking about within the Secular Therapy Project?
Just generally speaking. So if someone's, I guess the question is like, when should someone see a psychiatrist? When should someone see a marriage counselor? When should someone see? Yeah.
Well, I think in the intake, whenever you intake somebody, you're gonna go through your mental list or your checklist, and that'll tell you maybe they need to visit a psychiatrist for, meds. You at least get an assessment. So I was usually connected with one or two psychiatrists I could send people to and say, well, before our next session, I'd like you to go visit Dr. So-and-so, because it sounds like you might have some issues around depression or whatever. So I mean, but that's the best you can do. I'm not going to do a diagnosis on the first sit down with somebody, but I can usually sense, okay, they've already been on meds one time 3 years ago, and they dropped off because they, quote, didn't work. And here they are with me again. There's some things that you can look in their history and say, okay, why didn't they work? Well, was it because they didn't have a good talk therapist as they were going through it? Or maybe the psychiatrist didn't give them the right stuff, or they didn't stick with it long enough. There's a lot of those kinds of things I kind of look at. I don't know if is that what you're talking about, Andy? I'm sorry if I'm off base.
Well, what was the question specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I just want to make sure that that folks listening recognize some basic ideas, which is that a psychiatrist, generally speaking, would be your opportunity to have psychiatric medications prescribed.
Mm-hmm. Right,
also, like a psychiatric nurse practitioner can oftentimes fill that role. You can oftentimes get meds from your general practitioner or some other medical doctor, which might be the best option for you. If it's the only option, it's going to be a lot more accessible for a lot of folks. And I want to acknowledge that, while also saying that, generally speaking, a psychiatric medication coming from a psychiatric specific prescriber is going to be the better route. But all of that is kind of in its own category, separate from what we're talking about here, which is psychotherapy, maybe with a clinical psychologist or a licensed professional counselor, who are going to, correct me where I'm wrong here, but more generally be working with individuals on a one-on-one basis, which is not to say that you can't do couples counseling with a LPC and that you can't do individual therapy with a LMFT. But I guess I want to just demystify some of those terms and see if there was any other insights that y'all might be able to offer to folks who are just trying to find somebody to connect with and are struggling with the 37 different acronyms that they might have to learn in the process.
Well, I think also, whenever I was in grad school, I had the choice of deciding to go LPC or LMFT. And I went dual because I couldn't decide. So I said, fuck it, I'll do them both. Yeah, let's do them both. And so I think that, I love that you said that LMFTs can see individuals, because there's been a lot of people that I've sent individuals, referred individuals to LMFTs, and I'm LPC myself. And I've seen a lot of couples as well. I think it goes back down to what we were talking about earlier in this episode, not session. I'm used to saying session,
right?
In this episode where we're talking about that, the mystery of how do you dance and how do you vibe, which goes back to referrals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think when somebody gets a referral from somebody they trust, they come in on second base rather than first base.
Yeah, fair to say.
That helps the therapist, of course. And it helps the client, because they, so-and-so helped me. I think you might benefit from going and seeing Andy. So they already have evidence that one of their friends was helped by Andy. So they're going to go in with the expectation that Andy might be the right person for them too. I mean, that's a very rough thing that's going on there, but it's not very scientific, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the unfortunate nature of it. And the truth is, healthcare in this country and the way that we fund it, the way that insurance companies cover or really don't cover psychotherapy, I mean, all of these things create so many barriers that unfortunately we do kind of rely on something of a system of, a friend of a friend of a friend who introduced. And so if you have that opportunity, I definitely want to encourage you to take it. Certainly, we'll get into a little more detail in a moment about how to navigate some of these websites, but I wanted to also kind of highlight some possible red flags and see if either of you had any particular perspectives or hot takes maybe on some of these more modern products, because I know folks watching this show may very well see a advertisement for something like BetterHelp or Cerebral or some of these other ideas that are maybe a little different from your traditional therapy relationship. Should we be afraid of these products, or are they effective? Are they useful? What do y'all think?
I think, if I can jump in, I think that we should look at them kind of, if you're from a client's perspective, a little bit, cautious, with some caution. And the reason being, during lockdown, I can see 40 clients and it's 150 to see me, right? I can see 40 clients. I'll make so much money. I'll be rolling in that dough. I'll be feeling good, but I wouldn't be present. I wouldn't be Andy, and I wouldn't be a good therapist, And I think that the way that those networks are set up, it makes it to where the therapists are kind of seduced into the idea of having multiple clients so that they can make the money that they would need to sustain a living. So I'm a little bit weary of them. But then again, if you're in a rural area and you just really need to find a therapist and that's the network that you have, well, great.
Yeah, I kind of take that same approach of it's not my recommendation. It's not my favorite. It's not. But in the same way that I might say, like, there's a Mexican restaurant a short walk from my house, and sometimes I'll go there. It's not good, but it's there, it's available, and it fills me up. So when I see these things like BetterHelp, when I see things like Cerebral, if your finances, if your schedule, if frankly your comfort level is that maybe having a like on-demand therapist where you can have these 30-minute sessions, or you can have these like text message appointments, if that is the only way for you to get support, I don't want to scare you off of it. But I do want to say that we've already established that the relationship that you form with a professional is the important part of the therapeutic alliance, of the therapeutic process.
Yeah.
So if you have one of these like on-demand therapists, or if you are going through therapy like via text message and some of these other things, I'm not going to categorically poo-poo them, but I'm not excited about them. It's certainly not what I would recommend for a friend or a family member who was going through a really profound struggle.
I'm incredibly skeptical. I just am, and I know I'm retired. I've been around, but I look back and I think, well, I look at it personally. I mean, just reverse roles. When I was a client, the intensity of the face-to-face meeting with my therapist, I've had a couple of really good therapists in my career, I would have never happened online. It's just impossible.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying there's not good stuff that can happen. I've done a lot of therapy and a lot of coaching doing on Zoom, just like we're doing right now.
Sure.
And I think the evidence shows that you can do good stuff. And there's some psychological scientific evidence showing that compliant kinds of technology and all can help people with really clearly difficult issues. And we've seen it during the lockdown. I'm just skeptical that those other services there's no relationship there.
Yeah.
Well, they're set up to not create a relationship.
Yeah.
It's
exactly.
it's not to say that there aren't good therapists that use those services, or that you can't have good therapy through those services, but the dance and the game, or whatever you want to call it, of the way that it's set up, the algorithm or whatever, is not conducive to the best type of therapy.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
If you're in crisis and that's your only option, I would agree totally with you.
Oh yeah. Sometimes you need a margarita at that Tex-Mex place, you know?
Yeah. Right?
It doesn't matter what type of tequila or
yeah, a shitty margarita is still a margarita. And I don't love comparing mental health care to margaritas, but like here we are, and it works. It works. Well, okay, so one last question before we jump on the phones. I know that here in Austin, the new hotness right now is EMDR. A couple of years ago, it was DBT. Those are both great programs, and
totally.
I guess I am just curious if you're on that psychology today, if you're doing these searches and you see some of these buzzwords, DBT, EMDR, CBT, HAZE, any of those kinds of things. What do you make of them? You know, what kind of insights can y'all offer to folks who are not necessarily wanting to become therapists themselves? Like they don't have time to memorize all of these acronyms and to research all of these different strategies. So how seriously should we take it when a therapist advertises some of these terms?
That's a good question. I think that there's two ways we can take this. We can take it into the direction of letting the listeners know what these different things are and use this time to say that. But I think that the more interesting thing for me is to say, well, if you're looking for a therapist, what is it specifically that you're needing to work on? Because I know that whenever I first went into therapy as a client myself, I was 25 or 24. And I was experiencing panic attack disorder. So I was having panic attacks about having my next panic attack. So I couldn't, even understand the difference between that I have thoughts and they're different than feelings. Yeah. So my type of therapy was ACT therapy or CBT at that time. Now, right now, I'm seeing a Jungian analyst, and we talk about dream interpretation, which is totally different, right? So it's like I think it's kind of being honest of what is it specifically that you're wanting to work on, because all these different methodologies are just really great ways of saying and I don't want to call it a ladder, but I guess a ladder of kind of self-awareness. Where are you at? Whenever I was having those panic attacks, I could not do dream interpretation, and it'd be a waste of time, for me. Yeah. So I think they're all valid. They're all valid to me.
I would say, I think there's a hierarchy, at least in my...
I didn't want to say it, but I think there is.
I think there's a hierarchy, and in terms of the training of the therapists themselves. And these days, any therapist that does not know CBT is not a well-trained therapist. It's like,
fair to say.
Do you know arithmetic? If you don't know arithmetic, we're not going to let you go on.
A cook who doesn't know how to make eggs and rice is not a cook.
Exactly. So, CBT and then DBT and ACT, those are all have become like the industry standards. And then and there's a few others too, as well. EMDR, I've got some problems with because I don't think the evidence is fully there. Half of it is already DBT or CBT, so why call it EMDR? I'm not going to debate anybody about that. I'm just saying
that feels like a conversation I'd love to have over a beer sometime.
Yeah, right there you go. Yeah, we could do that, Christy. So the fact is that you want a therapist that has got good basic training. They really know their algebra. They really know their basics. They don't need to know trigonometry. They don't need to know calculus. They can help 80% of the people that walk in their front door with just those tools. And I think therapists make mistakes, big mistakes, when they try to get too sophisticated, and the therapists themselves go off on tangents. And then they think every client that comes in the door should get this new tangent that they just learned about. That is dangerous.
This new training that they went to over the weekend in
exactly
Boulder or something.
So I'm cautious. I think having watched therapists in my career over their careers, I mean, I watch what a therapist is doing in his first through fifth year, and then I watch what they're doing in their 15th year. Very different, because everything's all new. It's exciting. And the problem with a new therapist, and I forgive me if I'm not trying to offend anybody, but the problem with a new therapist is there's a lot of candy in this candy store, and they don't know which candy is poisonous, which candy is good.
Fair to say.
So well put.
It'll take about 5 years of practice. I mean, I'm serious. I got my doctorate, and I didn't know what the fuck I was doing for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
I honestly can say with a doctorate, it took me another 5 years to figure out what I really should be doing.
Yeah.
Now, of course, what I should be doing isn't what the next person should be doing. And I settled down on what my expertise could be.
Totally.
So I'm not trying to dump that on everybody else, but I'm telling you, a new therapist has to be a little more cautious not to jump on every bandwagon, because there's a new psychotherapy theory out every week.
Yep.
And they're all the greatest things since sliced bread, and not one of them has got any scientific evidence behind it. So be very careful. If it's not been around for 15 years, they haven't had time to do any research on it.
I love that. And I think that it's also important to be honest about where you want to be on that hierarchy. So speaking of hierarchy, I think when I hear the word hierarchy, I get really tense and I go, I don't like that. But by hierarchy, we're talking about hierarchy of consciousness or levels of development that you can go into a session and meet a client there. Sometimes, you want to land specifically only on CBT, and that is your thing. But you got to be honest about it. My favorite Jung quote, Carl Jung, was, "Thank God I'm Jung and not a Jungian." Isn't that great? Because he's saying, make your own fucking theory. Don't copy me.
Yeah.
Follow your heart.
Well, fair to say, there's definitely a lot to unpack here, and I know that we're not going to be able to cover it all. I'm actually shocked at how far we've already gotten in this episode without taking a call. So for that reason, I am going to take a moment and jump in with Kevin in California. Kevin is looking for a professional. What can we do for you tonight, Kevin? All right. Let me see if I can't get that sorted. Kevin, are you hearing us?
Yes. Hi.
Hey, howdy. What can we do for you tonight?
Hi. So I wanted to say thanks to you all, and a great pleasure to be speaking with Dr. Ray. I'm a big fan. So I kind of had a couple of questions, maybe a little background on me. I'm 32 and have children of my own and stuff. And so as a child, I was diagnosed with ADHD. I went through the mental health system a bit, and it didn't work out for me. I ended up leaving that age 16. I stopped taking medications and stuff like that, dealing with things on my own. And so as an adult, basically, my child has been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, and I've done some research, and I've started to think that maybe that was what was going on with me too. Mm-hmm. But obviously, because of my previous experiences, I'm very distrusting of therapists and psychiatrists and things like that. I've considered going back into that system or that type of therapy, or whether or not it would help me in my current state. And I was just wondering if you guys had a take on that.
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and say, if there is any population that modern therapists, I think, have done a poor job of really supporting, I would probably say that it would be the autistic community for a lot of reasons. So I definitely hear where you're coming from, while wanting to just really stress that while it may be difficult to find that person for you, that there are some incredibly neurodivergent affirming therapists that can absolutely do great work. Darrel, what insight were you about to offer?
Well, I was just going to say, what we know now relative to what we knew 15 years ago is orders of magnitude.
Sure.
People really do understand. I mean, we've got ways of looking at the brain that we didn't have 20 years ago, 15 years ago, much more granular. And we're understanding more and more what's going on neurologically. And I would just say, go back and give it a try again. Find somebody. And I totally agree, Christy. There's some really good people out there that really understand this. I'm not one of them. It's not my specialty. So, but I do know people who've seen it and done it, and they really are doing good work with people. So I think you and your child may benefit from getting back in and finding somebody. I think you'd be surprised. I've got some people who once would be called Asperger's. Of course, they don't use that term much anymore. And the work that this one psychologist here in town where I live has done with him is like turning him into a new person. He's really been able to thrive in an area he was just struggling with, and quite good professionally now. That in a way that I don't know. I just want to encourage you to reconsider.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Andy, would you have any tips for like how to read through a profile or for how to find that person?
No, I agree with Darrel. I mean, I think that Kevin, I would just advise that you have fun with a reframe on this, because it's a very fun, curious world to go into now. I think, as opposed to before, and that might be very healing for you to be able to do a hearty Google search and see what's out now as opposed to before. And similar to Darrel, I am not specialized in that, so I can't truly speak to that.
I would use the networks. You'll find if there's all sorts of groups now, families that have autistic children, people or them. There's all sorts of groups, and they know where the good therapists are, or they can help.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Okay. More so than with maybe any other, presenting concern. I would say that the autism community has done a great job of organizing, and I would tell you that that's where you should reach out. Wherever you're located, if you even just jump on Facebook and just find your local autism groups or whatever else, they're likely going to have some great professionals to recommend. And I would encourage you to perhaps even find a clinician that identifies as neurodivergent themselves. I think more and more therapists are beginning to do that. And so if that's that might be one search term I might encourage you to actually be on the lookout for, is if the therapist themselves identifies as neurodivergent, they're likely going to be in a good place. And if you meet with them and you feel comfortable, if there's something about their profile that resonates with you or that just feels like somebody that you'd feel comfortable sharing your secrets with, if they offer a consultation, which a complimentary 30-minute consultation to me is almost like a absolute necessity for a therapist.
Me too. I do that too.
Not every therapist does, and that's valid. I don't necessarily want to debate it, but I would definitely say that for my family and friends, that's something that I would encourage you to be looking for. And in that consultation, if you feel comfortable, if you feel understood, it's very likely you're in good hands.
Yeah. I think also California you're from California, right, Kevin?
Yeah.
California has predominantly LMFTs, I think, right, Christy? I think
I've heard that as well. Yeah.
So I think it'd be specifically to your region. You might get lucky and find someone who specifically works with families, just because that's the license that is the most popular over there in that region.
Okay, that'll be excellent. Yeah. I noticed a lot of the same behaviors that I had as a child in my son, and so it's been like really, I don't know, it was strange for me.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely appreciate you giving us a call, and I hope that we've been able to point you at least in the right direction. We're going to be talking a little bit more about some of these websites, and I've got links to a lot of the websites that we've been talking about in the show notes to this episode, so you might take a look at some of those things. But I think the advice I would give to you, I would really extend to everybody listening, which is that it's okay for this to be a process. It is okay for this to be kind of slow. When I sit down to watch Netflix, I try to limit myself to like no more than 5 minutes of making a selection, because I don't want to spend my TV time that way. But when it comes to finding a good therapist, you are welcome to send an email to a half dozen and to see who responds in a way that you appreciate. You're welcome to schedule a consultation with 2, 3, 4 people if you want to, and see who you connect with. It is okay to take your time, and don't feel like you need to be locked in just because you had 1 appointment or 2 appointments with somebody. If it doesn't feel right, it's okay to move on.
And also to be proud and transparent about how much willpower it takes to go open the door to that. It takes a lot of will, especially if you are in a position in which you're feeling off or you need help. Looking for a therapist is a lot of work. I mean, it's the same. I mean, I never thought about this until now, but it's the same kind of job as finding a job, right?
Yeah.
So no one wants the job of finding a job. No one wants the job of finding a therapist. It sucks.
Right.
So I think that no matter who it is, if you're looking for a therapist, just be very proud of the willpower that you have, even embarking on the journey.
Right. Well
and holding
said.
that in balance with the mystery of not knowing if you'll ever find someone. It takes a lot of throwing yourself into the abyss. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So I hope that gives you some place to go. Anything else we might be able to take care of for you real quick?
No, I appreciate all you guys' work and taking the time to talk to me, and have a great show. I'll be listening.
Hey, thanks so much.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right.
All right. Well, let's see. Let's jump into at least one more call before we go back to the interview and speak to Oz in Indiana. Oz, talk to us about your journey in finding a counselor.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on, and I appreciate you guys covering this topic. I think, well, we all know that it's something that's grossly under-discussed in general, but I was a believer for 30 plus years, and as a young guy, ADHD, bipolar, high anxiety, all those things, and was left untreated for almost that entire period of time, because I was always told to we either have to pray through it, faith through it, those kind of things. And I just thought that being scattered and the roller coaster part of bipolar, and then I usually struggle with more of the manic than I do the mania. I just thought all that was just normal, and that I was just going to have to deal with that the rest of my life. And then finally, when I deconstructed and deconverted and left, and I started talking to people that actually, followed and bought into, medicine and science, and all the good stuff. I was like, oh, so I may not have to feel like this. So it took quite a bit of time. It actually took to a place where I just had a complete manic meltdown, and I found myself in a behavioral health clinic, and it was there. It was, in that moment for me, it was humiliating. But once I got through that process, and I got real help from real professionals, real doctors, and we found the right, mix or cocktail of medications and, talk therapy and those other things. I'm now the most, stable and happy and consistent I've been in my entire life. But to drive down to the topic of what you guys are talking about, and I love what you were just telling the last caller, is, yes, if you are in crisis, hit the pause button and do what you have to do. Like, take care of yourself, but don't ignore the longer process, and where you have to have patience is finding the right therapist, and don't just jump in because you feel like you need to jump in. And it took me years. It took me years to find the secular therapist that I have today, and has been unbelievable for myself and my family. But it was years. It was a multiple year process to find that person.
How did you go about finding them? I'm curious.
Good question.
So I'd schedule appointments, and first question, as soon as I sat down, first question was, are you a Christian? And if so, are we going to have to, if we're going to talk about prayer and scripture and faith, I'll leave right now. I'm not going to waste your time. I'm not going to waste mine.
Fair.
And then the one that sticks out, my wife was in, she was on almost all of them with me, but we went in there, and I had asked, on the phone when I called about, religion and Christianity. They're like, oh, no, we don't do any of that. So I got in the office, and they stuck to their guns there. Now, they didn't bring, religion or God or anything into it, but literally in the first session, I'm almost a 40-year-old man, and, I don't play with toys. I don't do anything like that. She literally gets out toy dinosaurs, and wants me to start like reenacting stuff with these toy dinosaurs. I left and never went back.
I'm not going to pretend that I've never played with toy dinosaurs, but maybe not in the first appointment with somebody who's like not at all picking it up,
Got a Wolverine right here.
Right.
Funko Pop.
Yeah. But it speaks to the fact that you weren't engaged. That it wasn't fitting for you, and that's the important thing here is that you have a therapist that sees you as a person. I often recommend books to my clients, but I had a therapist that in the third session, in expressing to her that I am a full-time student working a full-time job in an abusive relationship who is just exhausted all the time. I'm so tired and I'm always feeling like I'm letting people down. She stands up while I'm speaking, walks over to her bookshelf and picks up a book that is, just like 500 pages and tells me to read the next 3 chapters before I come in next week. And like that just level of obliviousness is something to really be remarking on.
Sure.
Your therapist should not be doing good therapy. They should be doing therapy for or maybe with you. So it's really about that connection. It's about being able to listen to what you're looking for and responding to your specific needs, because I don't have 2 sessions in a day that look similar. I don't have 2 sessions in a month that look all that similar.
Yeah. Your job is to listen as a therapist.
Yeah.
Period.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I did appreciate the therapist that I do have now, and I don't see, unless I move away or she moves away, I don't see that that relationship ending. But that's what you just said. There was within a half hour of talking with her, I knew I was like, it was just, this is it. Like I finally found that, because every single one I met with, including her, I told them up front, like I don't know any of your other clients. I don't know how they interact with you, but I'm going to tell you right now, I will tell you everything you need to know. I just want to be better. I'm not going to hide anything from you. I have nothing to do that. So we don't need to play games. We don't need to go through all this. I just want help. I want best practices. And the fact that I've said all that and blunt, and we're still, again, in that scenario and in that context, that we still went to the dinosaurs blew my mind.
Yeah. And also, I mean, there are so many therapists out there. Like I said, in Austin, if you throw a rock, you'll hit a therapist. The working definition that I use for depression is learned helplessness.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep.
And so you don't want your therapist, the place that you go to heal, to be another source of your depression. You don't want to feel like you are stuck and there's no one else out there. You have options. You just got to like figure out like who feels right and who dances right with you. Maybe dinosaurs would be good for me, but not for you. Because I would love to have some dinosaurs in my office. That'd be awesome.
I was never trained in dinosaur therapy, so I feel ignorant here.
Yeah, and you know what? There's probably people, and I don't mean to offend, because there's probably people out there that the reenactment stuff I know, with other, figures or foreign objects can be helpful to other people, but that's just not me.
Exactly.
Like, I'm just brass tacks. Let's take care of it.
That's the important piece here. Yeah. So I know we've said it a half dozen times, but I'll just continue to reiterate. The most important piece of finding a good therapist is actually just finding a therapist that's decent enough and that is good for you. and that is hearing and listening to you, and that is saying things that are meaningful and impactful to you personally. So much of this is going to come down to that relationship and how comfortable you feel. So Oz, I really appreciate you giving us a call and walking us through your experience here.
Thank you, Oz.
Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Take care. You know, I'm curious y'all's reaction. We talked about this a little bit last week with Melissa Hargrave, but it does feel unfortunate to be oftentimes telling people like, well, you got to stick with it. You know, it's not just going to take one session. Like, you're going to have to continue, and you're going to have to be willing to work at it, while also telling people like, nah, if this doesn't work, move on. You know, don't feel stuck in those ways. And I know that can be sort of a difficult balance to strike. Do y'all have any insights for how to navigate that, like, gut level reaction of, no, fuck this is not the right person for me, while also wanting to have a little bit of stick-to-itiveness?
Yeah, I think that seeing a therapist, I'm just speaking for myself, seeing a therapist is a place in which we learn how to live the polarity of all things, you know, rigidity and chaos, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I think that, speaking earlier to what I was saying about will, whenever you think about like willfulness, you know, you're full of will. I can put gas in my car so I know it will drive. I can register my car, but it takes some willingness to throw myself onto the road to know that I might die. You know, I could die when I hit the road, and it doesn't matter how much willfulness I have to be willing to risk the mystery of the unknown. Mm-hmm. And I have to live the polarity of willfulness and willingness in order to really live life. If I go in one direction, then it's OCD of willfulness. If I go in the other direction, then it's like my life is chaotic and lackluster and I can't get anything done. So I think that whenever you see a therapist, you have to find a balance in living the polarity between all things and knowing that your ego, is this good enough? Willfulness. Which is important, navigated you to get your therapist, you know, isn't driving the ship. It needs to be somewhere in the gray area between trusting the process and trusting that you're there for the right reason.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say my key indicator is, does a therapist motivate you? Do you feel hope? Do you feel like, oh, there's something here, I want more of it? That's what brings a client back to the next session. And if you're, as a therapist, if you're not in tune with the client and not, if you're playing with dinosaurs, they might not want to come back to the next session. So, I mean, there's some responsibility on our side as a therapist to show the person hope so that they feel like this is valuable use of my time. Yeah. And that's a fine skill. Not everybody's got a, and some people need a few sessions to get there. I don't have a solution to the problem. I mean, I've had my share of people who came the first session, I never saw them again. So maybe I failed in showing them the value of what we were going to do together. Yeah. But you know, it's a two-sided thing. It's a relationship, and I have part of the responsibility in this relationship, and they have part of it. But they're coming in with a lot of pain and a lot of hurt. So I have to factor that in, and I have to have some motivational strategies, some strategies to offer them the hope that they really need. They're coming to me for hope. And then if by the second session they come back, I can actually start getting into the hope stuff. I have found, I mean, I don't think it's 100%, but I think if I can find the right homework assignment in that very first session, that brings them back. But if I find the wrong homework session, they'll never show back. I mean, yeah, you kind of have to guess right there. And it's a crapshoot because, man, one session, it's hard to get what you need sometimes. Anyway.
I hear that. You're hitting on something important though, which is I think the way that the therapist makes you feel to a certain extent.
Exactly.
You know, I want to really avoid any like wooey language around like vibes and energy, but I'll say that my office back on the earth that was when I had one, and I'm desperately eager to get offline and to have one again.
I love that.
I worked incredibly hard to curate that space. I mean, the lighting was just right, the colors was just right.
Yeah.
You may not have loved the art on the wall, but it was very intentional, and everything about that experience was meant to feel like walking into a really soothing, comfortable environment. Now, it's not a spa. It's not meant to just be like soothing in that sense. But if you are going to like really rip your guts out and lay them out on the table, you don't want to be doing that in a field hospital, right? Like you want to feel like the therapist knows what they're doing. You want to feel comfortable in that environment. And if you can walk away from that first session feeling a little bit of catharsis, maybe a little bit of relief, and perhaps you're a little bit exhausted or upset, but you feel like something fucking happened. You know, you weren't just filling out forms. It's valid, and I don't want to overstate it and shit on a bunch of very talented therapists, but so many professionals always start off by filling out a bunch of paperwork, and that intake session will be a bunch of check boxes about, you know, whether or not your maternal grandmother drank too much, and about, you know, like every relative you've ever had, and there's value in that type of data, and there's value in filling out some of those forms and asking those questions. But to me, it really misses the relationship once again. And I feel like if you walk away from that first experience just feeling rejuvenated a little bit, even if you're a little bit spent and tired, that's a very, very good sign.
Right. It's beautifully said. I think that, you know, I wish there was more that I could control in a session. But truly, I just show up and I strip away expectations and I see what they bring in. But the one thing that I can control is my environment. And I think about it kind of like a garden. Like if you tend to the soil and you water it and whatnot, the flowers will come out. You know what I mean? And so like you can control the ecosystem by which your clients can thrive. And also for you, if you come in and you know it's consistent and it's beautiful and it's like a place for you to unfold and enfold, then it's a place of healing. And that's unconditional positive regard too, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've already talked about a lot of the things that I wanted to cover in this section, which is good because we are running a little bit long. But I did want to really frame the question of, once you find a therapist that you're excited about, how do you go about contacting them? You know, if you like have found somebody on Psychology Today or any of these other websites and you are ready to reach out to somebody, I mentioned the thought of like a consultation. I mentioned sending emails and some of these things, but I think people maybe are often shy about doing that kind of stuff. And I'd just love to hear from two other professionals what those boundaries should look like, or what recommendations you might have.
What do you do, Darrel? What's your way?
I had a procedure I went through, and I found it really worked well. I think it's kind of unconventional, maybe, but that's just me, the way I did it.
Cool.
I would almost always get an email probably from somebody, and it was almost a referral. I would say huge amount of my clients were always referrals from somewhere else. So I had that advantage. You've been around long enough, you could build that up. But the first thing I would do is I would maybe have a phone call with them, but just 10 or 15 minutes. And then I would say, I want you to sit down and just write out what your concerns are in a paragraph or two. It doesn't have to be long, but I want you to take the responsibility to do that and then send it to me. And then let's set a time. I never did the 30-minute preliminary consultations. That really kind of happened over the 15 minutes on the phone and then them writing out everything.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the interesting thing was in them having to write it out, they're making a commitment in a way that helps me know what I need to do. It also helped me a few times say, I don't think I'm the right person for you.
Yeah.
And make a referral. I could just move right on. We wouldn't waste any of their time or money.
Yeah.
But I tell you, once you got that piece of writing in front of you, or at least for me, that became a touch point literally for the next 4 or 5 sessions sometimes. And it really kept us going. I don't know. It seemed to really get us off to a jump start. I just kind of came on that accidentally many years ago. And I just stuck to it. You know, it works. I actually will not see, I set a rule for myself. I will not see a patient. I will not see a client if they don't write out their concerns. And I never did insurance. Never. If you're not self-pay, I don't want to see you. I never did. So I don't
get out of here.
I don't want to get too deep into the weeds. I could absolutely talk about the money and the way we finance therapy and the problems with that system all day. But very briefly, I do think it's worth mentioning to the audience what should they be expecting from their insurance providers? Because I think people often reach out to me and are a little bit like shocked when I don't take their insurance. And I always have to kind of gently chuckle to myself and be like, you know, good luck, because I think it's unlikely that you're going to find anybody, certainly not anybody that specializes in some of the things that I specialize in, that's going to take your coverage.
Yeah. I'll tell you that I tell people this publicly a lot. I've tried to preach this is if therapy is too expensive for you, then how expensive is continuing your current life? How much is it costing you when you lose a job, when you lose a relationship, when your children are, you know, look at all the consequences of continuing your life the way you are. How much is that worth to you? How much is that costing you? And I mean, I don't know that everybody buys into that approach, but
I know it can sound really smug when it's coming from a therapist, but a therapist that I really admire used to say that, like, oh, you can't afford therapy? You should probably spend some money on therapy about it. Like your therapist can talk to you about like why it's a challenge, and I recognize that it's expensive. I mean, Jesus, like my own therapy bills are challenging for me in a lot of ways. But like we highlighted at the top of the show, there are some great low cost opportunities. I mean, Andy, you and I met working for an agency where people could start for at as low as $10 an hour, and whether like wherever you're at, if you're not in a major city, especially with the advancement of online counseling services, I'm confident that you can find a talented professional for like anywhere from $20 to $50 or $60 an hour. And it can definitely go north of that by a long shot. And I often do like recommend and prefer. I mean, my therapist charges, I think, $180, and that feels like a lot. But if that's not where you're at financially, that's okay. You can find something that's going to work within your budget.
Whenever I saw my first therapist, I was, you know, a touring musician doing all of that stuff, and I live in Austin, and there's this beautiful organization called the Sims Foundation. And
we talked about that a little bit last week with Melissa, but please go on.
Yeah, I saw a therapist who, I think, I haven't checked his rates now, but I would assume it's somewhere around like 150 to 200, and I was paying $40. You know, I mean, there are a lot of options. And speaking of what we said before, if you are going through what I went through in my early 20s of panic attacks about your next panic attack, sometimes BetterHelp is the best option, right? It's like $40 to have someone to help you stop having panic attacks. Great. Sign me up.
Yeah, well, we've got just about 15-20 minutes left, so let me go ahead and grab just a few more phone calls if we can. Let me start with Deborah in Oregon. Deborah, what do you have for us tonight?
Oh gosh, so much. Just listening to that last caller just like put so much in my head. First off, I have to say, Dr. Darrel, my neighbor Mike, who's sitting next to me, he wants me to tell you hi because he's a huge fan.
Okay.
But I was first displayed symptoms of like depression and anxiety and all that stuff in my early teens. And my parents were like, oh, just have faith, pray on it, you'll be fine. Okay, fast forward to my 25, 30 years, and I'm still having these issues. And then doctors started throwing pills at me. I never attended therapy till I was in my 40s. And let me tell you what an eye-opener, okay? I attended therapy. It took me a little while to get a therapist that I was finally comfortable with. The one I'm with right now is the bomb. She calls me, and I don't feel anxiety about having to have my appointments. I feel good and relief because she's on the other end of that phone, and I can actually exchange what's going on in my life. And through her, and believe me, a lot of medication, we've gotten to the core of my issues, which is a lot of abuse that happened in my childhood that I had forgotten about, a lot of repressed memories. So now I'm on medication for that. And the problem I see is that, like, when people come into my house, like my father-in-law, he didn't mean anything bad by it, I'm sure, but the first words out of his mouth is, Jesus Christ, who takes all those prescription drugs? And that would be your daughter-in-law, because she's dealing with mental health issues plus an autoimmune disease. And I think the big thing that if we could just address the normality of mental health issues and going to therapy, I think we would get a lot more people who will actually go in and get the therapy, because there's nothing wrong with saying, I need someone to talk to, or I need somebody to listen to me and help me deal with my situation.
Yeah, I mean, just think culturally how we would respond to somebody who said that they had never seen a doctor until they were in their 40s, right? Like, we would assume that they grew up in some bizarre religious sect or in some like unreached Amazonian tribe or in incredible poverty or something along those lines. And the reality is your brain, your mind really is a incredibly important part of your body, and it's worth checking in on occasionally. I absolutely hear you, Deborah, and I really appreciate you raising that point.
Yeah, I mean, if we don't express, then we depress. You know, it's important.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's important to, like, you know, be able to talk to someone.
Oh, no, it's so important, because you can only talk to your spouse and your children and your group of friends so much before it's human nature to get a little tired of hearing it, you know, and that's why the therapist I have now, I would welcome that woman into my house for a barbecue. I really would. That's how awesome I feel with her. But she is just like, hey, you know what? It's okay that you can't talk to your spouse of 20 years about this kind of stuff, you know? You just need to come here where it's safe and you can express all of that stuff. And it's so important, you know? And on a point that you guys were talking about, you can't afford therapy. Okay, I did the math. All right. And I'm a big soda drinker. I love my soda. Okay. My therapy costs me the same that it costs me to have one soda a week, one soda a day for an entire week. That's what my therapy costs me and my copay. So for me, I'll give up my damn Diet Coke as long as I can have my therapist. That's how much I like it.
Is Diet Coke your poison?
It is my poison. I've given up everything else that I needed to. I went keto, don't eat carbs unless they're vegetables. I don't eat a lot of sugar, but I just cannot give up that Diet Coke. Just can't do it.
Well, congratulations, Deborah. You have really made a huge step for yourself. You took some major responsibility there. And that's good. And say hi to your neighbor for me. That's always fun.
I will definitely do that. He's going to like fangirl out now that when he listens to this back, he'll go, oh my God, my neighbor, he said hi. Because he really does enjoy you a lot and listens to you all the time. So,
okay.
But yeah, I just wanted to make sure, you know, you got to put it out there, because I just want anybody who's listening to know, hey, I'm a 51-year-old woman who struggled with this her whole life. I don't want everybody else to struggle like I did. Get the damn therapy, get the drugs, get what you need to do to make your life better, because you only get one shot at this. Why would you want to be miserable the whole time through, you know?
Good.
Yeah. Oh, no, you put it as sharply as I possibly could. Thank you so much. And yeah, we appreciate you calling. You have a great night.
Absolutely. You too. Have a good night, you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, we've got, I think, just about enough time for one more. So I'm going to try and sneak in a call from Jeanluc, who wanted to talk about a bad experience he had. Jeanluc, what can you tell us? What's your story?
Hey, how you doing, Christy, Dr. Darrel, and Andy? So my experience, it actually started out pretty good. In that I was really doing pretty bad for a while there, but no. When I got out of high school, I was feeling down, and I thought I might have been suffering from some form of depression, and I really couldn't cope and deal with much of anything. And so I actually did. I found a therapist, and he seemed good at first. You mentioned things about the first session you should feel a little something. I mean, I didn't know what I felt after the first session. I'm like, okay, no, this is okay. And he had a little bit of an accident. He was working in his garage and actually severed his thumb.
Oof. And
after that moment, it seemed like his attitude had changed.
Wow.
One of the things is he had this jar of pretzel sticks. He loved having them during his therapy session. I know the other guy mentioned dinosaurs or whatever, and that's fine. I'm food motivated, as it were.
Yeah.
But it was seeing him trying to open up that jar of pretzels without his thumb for the first time.
Oh.
And you could just see, you could just see in his face. And I'm like, okay, so let's keep doing the session. And he kept on, after that, kind of blaming me for being an asshole, which, okay, yeah, I probably was to some extent. But yeah, it's just one of those things where I'm like, I'm looking at this guy like, do you need someone to talk to?
Yeah. No, I hear that. I mean, obviously therapists are people. Obviously we have shit going on in our real lives. I'm sure that was a profound moment for him, and I want to be compassionate about it. But Jeanluc, none of that is your goddamn problem.
Yeah.
I want to be human about it, and I want to, allow the professionals in our lives to be humans, but I also expect them to be professionals. And I mean, I've had arguments with my partner that went late into the night when I knew that I had a full day of work the next day. And, I've had to make that judgment call about whether or not I should disappoint people by canceling or risk hurting people by not canceling. And, there definitely is a line to be walked there. And I think a little bit of grace and compassion on all sides is valuable. But ultimately there is a responsibility. I mean, this is a commodified relationship. You are paying money for a service, and there is a expectation that the person accepting that money is providing that service. A therapeutic relationship is one in which the therapist holds space and that you get to be a puddle. And if that's not the dynamic, then there's some real ethical concerns to be aware of here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with that. And it wasn't a thing where it was just a couple of weeks or whatever. No, it was a few months. The therapy sessions, and it got to the point where you're right. I felt like every time I went in there, and I saw him struggling with the pretzel, and I don't know, maybe it was something, like, oh, well, if you're struggling with this, how can you help me kind of thing? Because, I do think you're right in that, it's kind of like a relationship in some form. And I had no problems with him in the beginning. This was before, this was, God, been 20 years ago. So there was no, I don't think there was secular therapy project back then. If there was, I didn't know about it. But he didn't try to force religion on me, and I made it clear that, hey, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in this, this, that, and the other thing. And if we're going to talk, you got to leave that out. I kind of want to bring that up. And I did have one question specifically about the secular therapy project, because I don't know if I could get really a good answer on it. I'm not really looking for myself. I actually have a very good support network of people who I can, talk to and confide in and all that good stuff. So I'm not really hurting for anything right now, but I am also former military, and I was wondering if, you talked about, you don't really talk about payment and all that, but does the secular therapy work with VA at all? Because I think that, there are plenty of veterans who are suffering, and they're definitely secular veterans. And I think that if they could help, that would be awesome.
Well, every therapist in the database is their own practice, and they determine what they take insurance wise and all. And I know quite a few in certain areas will take TRICARE, and TRICARE's got, I don't remember, so many sessions per year per person. So I'm positive that we've got people. Well, for example, I do know someone in Tennessee who's working with a veteran or up by Fort Campbell. So, I mean, I'm aware of that. So I don't know any of the details. Obviously, it's not my business. So yeah, the answer is yes, we'll work. They will work with anybody, but it's all their practice. We don't have any control over how much they charge, what insurance they take, who they work with. That's all part of theirs. We're just like a listing service, a database that we can verify that the people in our database meet the criteria. And oh, by the way, just for everybody listening, if you go to seculartherapy.org and hit the button, apply to be a therapist, not that you're going to be a therapist, just hit that button and read the qualifications, read what we expect of our people that are in the database. That will help you. You can actually use that. You can print that off and take it to your next, to a therapist and say, hey, would you agree to these criteria? Even if they're not a member of the Secular Therapy Project, we don't care. Use it to help vet your future therapist. Anyway, I hope that answered your question a little bit.
Oh yeah, it did. It definitely did. Because they say there are no atheists in the foxholes, but I guarantee you there are.
Oh, there's tons. There's tons. Yep.
All right. Well, I appreciate you giving us a call tonight, and hope you have a great night.
All right. Thank you. You too.
Man, we're going to be eating pretzels and playing with dinosaurs. And drinking Diet Coke. And drinking margaritas, too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, who's up for shitty margaritas after the show?
I'm in.
Next time I'm in Austin, all three of us are going to get together to have pretzels, dinosaurs, margaritas, and Diet Coke.
Where are you, Darrel? Where are you?
I'm in Kansas City. But I before the COVID, I'd got down to sometimes about a couple times a year. I'd see Christy. We'd have a beer together or lunch together.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You gotta bring that barbecue though. If you come down.
We have the world's best barbecue. There is no bad barbecue in Kansas City. And the reason,
all right. Yeah, sure. Just go ahead and come to the atheist community of Austin and start bragging about your, sure.
And I'm serious, because if there was a bad barbecue, the word would get out. They would be out of business quick. That's why I
love Kansas City barbecue. It's good. It's nice. We got better brisket though. I'll tell you that.
All else is just pretenders. We could argue about that, but I won't do this on Christmas.
Okay.
Oh, man. I used to listen to old episodes of the show. I used to listen to your episodes of the show, Darrel, while my dog and I jogged past Franklin's barbecue every morning.
Darrel,
and here you are.
It's a sign.
You know what? Okay. Well, we're getting near the end here, so I'm gonna take a moment to walk through some different things that we wanted to make sure to hit on, but just to kind of wrap up this conversation, I wanted to see if either of you had a just quick distillation, because I know we've been talking about a lot of stuff here, and I'd love to hear if you have just a 30-second elevator pitch, or just your best piece of general advice for how to find a good therapist, because we've covered so many different ideas, from like what is DBT to how religious can a therapist be, and where does their school matter, and what does their license matter, and all of those things. Do you have like a final thought or anything that you'd like to just really make sure to leave the audience with tonight?
Well, I would say make sure they're not religious, and make sure that's not their hidden agenda. That's that's my thing. I would also say one sign. It's not a perfect sign, but it is a sign we haven't mentioned, and this is secular sexuality here, and that is try to see if they're sex positive, if they've had the kind of training that would tell you they understand human sexuality. Because even if that's not your issue going into them, that means they've taken the time to learn all about humanity, not just their little niche, whatever it is. Anyway, that'd be my little tip. I don't know.
No, that's fair. I'll just kind of gently pile onto that by saying that as a therapist who works particularly with issues of gender and sexuality, and often I will work with the sex worker community or the trans or the poly community, and I try not to be like shitty about virtue signaling or whatever else, but I know that something that clients continuously tell me sets me apart is the fact that they can start to talk about their metamor without having to stop and explain what a metamor is.
If they don't know what polyamory is, I think I'd leave the office. Yeah.
But I mean, like some of those words that feel important to you. Now, I mean, I'm not going to be culturally competent for every culture on the planet, but if you are looking for a therapist and you want to deal with a particular type of issue, and you start talking about, say, your chronic pain, say your relationship dynamic, or your profession, or these types of things, and you're having to stop and educate them on some of these topics, that's maybe a sign that they are not the right fit for you. They might be an incredibly talented therapist. They might be an incredibly kind and compassionate person. But if you are having to explain yourself in these really basic ways, or if you do walk into a therapist office and they just are all of a sudden automatically know, like, oh, you had this experience, you likely know this person, or maybe you've heard of this. And, if you can resonate on culturally in that way, I think there's a lot of value there. But Andy, anything you want to add to all this?
Well, I know we're on the Secular Sexuality podcast, but I would say that I'm not opposed to someone being religious so long as they don't have an agenda for you. I think that that's the biggest thing about like why it's difficult. I don't like the term Christian counselor because that in itself is an agenda. But if someone, that's the damage there, is if they have conditions by which they perceive the best route for you, because that's egotistical and narcissistic. I would say that any advice that I would give is the first step is look for the source by which to find your therapist and trust the source. So if you have a friend who has a good therapist, or if you, have a friend who is a therapist, like all three of us, look at the source first, someone who knows you. And then if you don't have that, then look for a way to connect before you pay, which is a consultation, or which is, looking at their podcast interviews or anything like that, so you can get the vibe, the word vibe.
Sure.
Yeah.
For lack of a better one, right?
Of who they are, because it's true. You can look at their CV on their website, but it really comes down to how do you mesh with them and how do you dance with them, and that's surrendering yourself to the mystery. And lastly, I think I also want to emphasize that it takes a shitload of courage to do it, and willpower, and to recognize that within yourself as the first step.
Yeah, I certainly work very hard to honor that with any client that comes into my office, that they likely spent months working up the courage to get to this point. And then once they did get to this point, they likely went through a bunch of hassle and bullshit and perhaps some
Totally.
bad therapists to get to me.
Totally.
And I really want to honor that. Just very quickly, an anecdote from my dad that really stands out to me here. When I was younger, my dad, who's worked in restaurants his whole life, back in a day before we were turning in like applying for jobs online and everything else, and like actually having a printed resume that was on like nice cardstock that you couldn't lay out on Word document, but actually had to like take to a professional. He had his resume lined up like the menu of a restaurant menu. So his education was like under the appetizers, and special skills was like under the a la carte section and things like that. And we talked about it, and he told me that, some employers saw it as unprofessional, but that was actually great. Because if he turned in his resume to a job that he might want, and they looked at it and they thought like, I don't know, this isn't very professional looking, it was a great way for him to know, oh, I don't need to work for these people.
Exactly,
This is
dude.
not a good connect for me.
Yeah.
So
Beautiful.
if you go to somebody's website and they have a bunch of hand-drawn cartoons, or if they have a bunch of like atheist content, or they have any of that good kind of stuff,
Or they
and
play with
it strikes
dinosaurs.
you, yeah, or if they play with dinosaurs, like whatever resonates with you, if you see something like that, is a therapist's opportunity to show you their personality. And if their personality is corporate and rigid, and or if it's overly like spa and soothing, maybe be skeptical of that, but if it resonates
said,
for you,
Christy.
then go for it.
Yes, Christy, I'm so into that. It's so true. I'd rather someone be fully themselves. Okay, back to what I was saying, authentic and appropriate. I'd rather someone be completely authentic and inappropriate than someone who's completely appropriate and completely inauthentic.
Yeah, fair to say.
You know what I mean? I want someone to be themselves, especially my therapist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's ultimately a relationship, and I think that's important to remember.
Yeah.
So, Darrel, we have talked a lot tonight about the Secular Therapy Project. I don't want to get the corporate structure incorrect, but the Secular Therapy Project is, at seculartherapy.org. But that's also a part of, or a sister to, the Recovering from Religion Foundation?
Yeah, it's a sub-program of Recovery from Religion. And I wanted to come on tonight to let people know we've got our annual excursion, and it's coming in September 17 and 19. And it's an opportunity for people to come and just hang out with other people going through some kind of religious recovery. And we will actually have at least 3 psychotherapists there, not including myself. And they're there for crisis or for just talking to people. So you have an opportunity. It's not therapy. We're not pushing that. But it is an opportunity to just help get some ideas about how you can move forward, to talk to other people who've gone through the same thing. We have a great program. I'm going to be speaking on several different topics. Gail Jordan will speak. Alice Gretchen, if you don't know that name, she is a movie actress, and her IMDb is pretty impressive. She will be one of our guest speakers, and she's going to be talking about the neuropsychology of and religion. Her talk is phenomenal. I dare say there are PhDs that couldn't give a better talk, and she's not a PhD, but she really knows what she's talking about. Anyway, it'll be great programming out in the middle of a gorgeous place in the middle of North Carolina, up in the hills, foothills of the Appalachian. In fact, we will be taking a very short hike on the Appalachian Trail as a part of our programming. So anyway, just a great place to decompress, meet other people. Here's some good programs. Mandisa Thomas will be there doing karaoke for us. Candace Gorham will be there. She'll be teaching mindfulness and meditation. And she'll be one of the therapists. I could name a whole bunch of people that are going to be there. Well, we will sell out, probably. We did last time. And we have subsidies for people who need assistance. So we want to help people get there. So if you need to go to recoveryfromreligion.org, hit the excursion button and find out, what you need to know. Thanks, Christy, for letting me do that.
Yeah, that again
you
is
have pretzels Will you have pretzels at the place?
Well, that's a good request. I think we should. Every therapist should have
Every therapist should have a jar of pretzels. That's fair. That's fair.
I like that. Okay.
Well, that again is recoveringfromreligion.org, and we'll make sure, of course, to have links to that in the show notes for the episode. But Darrel, where can people find out more about your work? Of course, Secular Sexuality falls into that category, but where else might you point people?
Well, they can find my books, The God Virus and Sex and God, on Amazon. They can find me at Recovering from Religion, just Darrel at Recovering from Religion, if they've got a question or whatever. And I'm all over Twitter, Facebook. I'm maxed out on my 5,000 closest friends, I think, but you can still follow me. And I post quite a bit of content around religious trauma syndrome and religious trauma. And that's been kind of my passion the last year or so.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at those kind of things. Anyway.
Yeah, and then Andy, tell us where folks can find you. You're on the Facebook. You do the Instagram. Where are you at?
I got the Facebook. I got the Instagram. I decided not to do the TikTok. It's too much for me. It stresses me out. I have too much stuff already. But yeah, AndyLaneCounseling.com. I live in Austin, but I can see anyone in Texas with my license. So if you're in San Antonio or Dallas or whatever, I still see clients online. The majority of my clients are creatives of some sort. So whether that's a musician or a writer or an author, or I see a lot of comedians. It's awesome. Seeing comedians is awesome. If you haven't seen a comedian, it's great.
That actually does sound like a career bucket list item that I need to hit.
It's awesome.
They're coming to you to get material. You know that, don't you?
Yeah, right? Yeah, you're somebody's stand-up.
They've actually told me that they said they have material about their therapist. So it's funny.
Yeah.
But yeah,
so there are all these memes about like, well, somebody's therapist knows about you. So somebody's stand-up set is about you as a therapist.
100%. So it's a lot of writer's block and creatives and people like that, and that's kind of me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll say again that, finding the right therapist can be very hard, but it may have just gotten a little bit easier because AndyLaneCounseling.com is a great place to check out if you are here in Texas and if you are interested in talking to somebody. We've had an opportunity here to get to know each other's personality a little bit, and I would really continue to highlight that as an important aspect of this. Of course, there are a number of different types of websites, whether we're talking about inclusivetherapist.com or weglimmer.com or therapyden.com. I mean, all of these different places. I've got a collection of those in the show notes for this episode. So if you are ready to start that journey, Secular Therapy Project, all of these are great places to start. But wherever you start, we just hope that you start. We just hope that you take that first step. And of course, if there's anything that we can do to help here at the show, please let us know. We're SecX at atheist-community.org. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the show or to point you towards any resources or anything else that we might be able to help with. I also want to make sure to let people know tonight about tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. Tiny.cc/AEN podcast is the quick link where you can find all of the ACA's content. If you want to catch an audio-only version of all the different programs that we offer. I also like to mention the importance of community in these shows. I mean, all of the work that we do, all of these conversations, they're an ongoing kind of conversation. So I hope that you'll find a way to join us, whether that's in the Secular Sexuality Facebook fan group, as well as the, check us out in the fan group. I'm there all the time. People are tired of my dumb hot takes and my silly jokes, but I'd love for you to join us and maybe drown me out a little bit. And then, of course, there is the ACD Discord, the fan-run Discord. That's at tiny.cc/ACD Discord. And beyond that, I want to make sure to mention all of our great Secular Sexuality merch. You can see my shirt just behind the screen there. You can find those at bit.ly/AEN merch. And with all of that mouthful and all of that information, I want to make sure to save the most important introduction for our incredible crew that was able to get Andy mic'd up and set up for this episode in a very short period of time.
The dinosaurs.
Curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal.
Respect. And wherever Vern is, thank you, Vern.
Yeah. Thank you to all of the people that put this show together. Thank you to all the people that donate and subscribe and do all of the things that help us to stay on the air. I mentioned this briefly last week, but honestly, when Darrel was ready to hand this show over to the ACA, they found me by an incredible stroke of luck. And honestly, I was interested and excited out of a sense of debt and obligation to my community because I had just received so much help and support myself. And I am so grateful to be able to have something to offer to this community. And I absolutely cannot do it without the continuous donations and the support and just the people that make this community up. I mean, just by watching, by joining into the Facebook groups and being a part of the atheist community of Austin, you make this kind of thing possible. So thank you so much for everything that you do. And Darrel, with you being here, I feel like I have to hand the responsibility off to you. What advice would you have for people today?
I would say go out and give yourself a big orgasm or give somebody else a big orgasm.